So we talked about authentication and cookies and those kind of things last week. Did anybody have questions on that from the authentication piece?
Yeah, actually, I do. I managed to work through this yesterday. I was using Postman, and it was not allowing me to do my. This is for the test. I was doing the review on the emoji ID page, and while I got my route to work before, just using what was the circumstance? I think after I added Joy and I added auth, I required auth, and then there's another line I got to put in underneath that where I forget, but it broke it. The Postman wouldn't work after that. And I played around with it. I went under the authorization tab under there's params, authorizations, headers, body, request, and then I put in bearer token and copied the token. Then it worked. But if I didn't do that,
just hold up one second. So at least the way that we had set it up, we're not sending the bearer header. That would be a different way to set it up, but we didn't set it up with the bearer header, the authorization header. The way we were sending it back and forth is a cookie. So the way I would expect you to be sending it back and forth in Postman is I would expect you to be setting it up as a cookie.
How would we do that?
So basically you have to start by logging in and then steal the token that you use to log in from the browser. So that's where like edit this cookie comes in, because I can copy and paste the cookie from there.
Yep.
So what I would do is I would go into, say, one of these. You can do authorization. Yeah, that's this tab. And then you can do things like bearer token, and that's kind of the way to send. There's an auth header, but oftentimes the way that you want to send it, I forget where is. I remember there's a place to put in cookies here, but I forget. Oh, there it is. Cookies is up here. So you just need to add in a cookie.
You mean that long thing from edit this cookie, right?
Right. So I think I have, let me just run my example application here, which actually is already running. So if I log in,
well, do it logged out first, because I want to see that it doesn't work if you get the same results, because it brought up the HTML in the view window normally where you get the the response.
I don't have it. I don't have something hooked up that's looking at it right now, so it wouldn't break anyway. But the point is that oh nope, I don't want to do that. The point is you want to go in here and say, for instance, this would be localhost, I believe, is the domain, and I can double check that in the browser. So the browser here is localhost without the port number. Localhost. So I add, and in there I want to add a cookie, and it just kind of gives you a layout for it. So you've got the cookie would be auth token, and the value would be what I grabbed from there. Then the path would be slash, because we're starting with we want that for the whole website. Domain is localhost. Expires, it says Wednesday the 3rd November, and maybe I just change this to 4th.
Yeah, it doesn't matter really, as long as it's in the future, right?
Yeah, as long as it's in the future, it doesn't really matter. So that's how you would set that up. Is I would set it up in here in this window, and then get back out of here and submit the query. So that's where you need to set it up, is as your cookies. Now I think that I'm going to the wrong. Well, that's a different website anyway. Because I'm on port 3002. So if I wanted to actually test this, I don't think I have an API in this example. No, I don't. But if I were to go, for instance, to the, I could go to the dashboard, or sorry, I could go to my account profile, which is this. Let me add a new. So my cookies there. I'm gonna go to 3002 account me, and I'm getting this back. You see that?
Yes, that's what I got. I was like, what is this? So
I'm getting back an HTML page, right? So because that's what I'm going to. But if I were to, for instance, maybe change this cookie, maybe break it a little bit in the sense, say auth tokens, just change the name of it, and try to send this again, you notice how I get the login page instead.
Right. Okay. There might be more than one way to do it. I did it under authorization and just copied or pasted the token in bearer header, and it got me through.
I'd be very surprised if it worked with the bearer header at all, because you'd have to be checking for the bearer header on your backend code. So anyway.
Well, I know enough to be dangerous, and I just went in there and just started changing things around, and it managed to work.
Okay. Yeah, because
but I took it out.
You have to change something on the back end to make that to work, but you can't break the cookie logic because you still need the cookie logic for the website. So you basically have to change if you're going to use the bearer logic, you have to actually set it up in such a way that you can do it both with the bearer, both with the authorization header, and with the cookie, because you actually need both pieces of functionality still.
2 quick questions.
Yep.
So first off, on the Postman thing you just did here, when you changed it from auth token to auth tokens, did it take you from your page to the login page when you put tokens in?
Yeah.
Okay, so it just decided that you weren't a user and took you to the login page.
Right. That meant I didn't have a valid token. Right.
Oh, yeah.
Because if I look at the back end, I'm using this middleware, and my middleware says, if the token's not valid in the exception case, then kick them back to account login, redirect them to account login. So that's the middleware that's taking care of that.
And then on the bearer area, I saw that you did it inside of Postman, but in the video on Perusall, the guy did it through the code in VS Code. Would you recommend just using the way you just did it over the other one?
What do you mean?
So in on the actual video in Perusall, he coded bearer into an actual JS file onto our VS Code, and then selected bearer inside of his post.
Right. So what would change here is basically I'm pulling the token specifically from the cookie, right?
Yeah.
And I'm only pulling it from the cookie. So I'd have to change that logic to look at the authorization header. So right now this cookie is broken, obviously, we can see that. If I go to, let me grab the cookie again. And without changing anything on the back end, so authorization, and I want to say, if I say bearer token, and hit send, you see it still kicks me back to the login screen.
Yeah.
Right? And it still kicks me back to the login screen because my code on the back end is completely ignoring that authorization header. So if I wanted to look at that, I would need to look at the actual authorization header and see that it's there. So if I were to go into my code, basically I'd have to change this line of code to kind of work through that. So I might say let token is that, and then I'd say, well, if there's not a token, then I need to go do some additional logic, right? So then I need to go look at the authorization header. So if I remember right, request dot headers, I think you can get there. I need to look at the Express documentation. But I think it's request.headers, and then it's the name of the header you're trying to get to. So let's go here, 4x, the request, and I want to look at, where am I missing headers on there? Request app body. Where do I get to the headers?
It wouldn't be in body, would it?
I don't think it is, because body is just all the stuff that you're sending as part of the actual data.
You're trying to enable the bearer token, right? That's what we're doing right now.
Yeah, well, that's what I was looking at, is the bearer token. Do you remember which property of the request you had to refer to? Because I'm not seeing it here. Because I would assume it's headers, but maybe I'm mistaken. I might need to go to the node documentation. Node HTTP request. Because I know this is built on top of the node object. So I'm in the HTTP module. Client request. And I don't know why I'm not. There's a set header method. Oh, there's a get header. Okay, that's what I want. So I need to get the header by name. So then I would say request.getHeader, and if I remember right, the name of that header is authorization. And maybe I just do a debug real quick to see if this shows anything. So if I debug auth header, and I've got that right, then when I hit it with Postman, it should show something here. But it says get header is not a function. So is that a function that's there and not? Oh, it's get. Returns a specified HTTP request header field. Refer and okay. So I need to call get. That's what I'm missing. Like, what is it called? It's just called get. So get authorization, and then let me send that again. There we go. So here you can see my token coming through. Do you see that?
Yeah.
And it's interesting to note, when I put it into Postman, it said this is token, right? Bearer token. The important thing with the authorization header, there's always starts with a keyword. So in this case, it's starting with bearer. And that first keyword tells you how to treat the data after it. So for instance, there's something called basic authentication, where sometimes you'll see your browser pop up and ask you for a username password. Have you maybe seen that somewhere before? Possibly on intranet kind of thing. So that comes if you're filling out a username and password in kind of a pop-up that comes up. That's what's called basic authentication, and that actually happens anytime you send the status code 401 back. So that if this were basic, then you would see something completely different. And I think I can actually emulate that if I go to basic auth here. and say user pass. So if I look at that back in this world, you'll see so it says basic, yada yada. So this in here is basically just, if I remember right, it's base64 encoded over the username and the password. So I could actually take this here and unbase64 encode it, and we would see what's there. Base64 decoder. So what's actually being sent is user : pass, right? With that basic auth, and that's being base64 encoded. So it's not like hashed or anything. It's not private, but that's how it's being sent over. Okay.
Yeah, wow, it's this difficult. I don't understand headers. I don't understand what that means. That concept. I kind of need to explain it like I'm 5.
It's metadata. It's data that's in addition to the data that you're sending and sending back. So it is metadata in the sense that it's information about information. It's stuff that anything in a header you're not really going to largely see in your browser. But your headers actually are really important when you're trying to do AJAX and REST APIs often, because then you tend to use those headers quite a bit, as it turns out.
Okay, so in this case, let me just talk this through. So line 7, we're getting the token, right? Mm-hmm. Now, if there is, in line 8, 9, and 10, if mm-hmm. there is no token, then how can there be an authorization header?
What do you mean? No,
well,
the token, I'm pulling it from the cookie. See, I'm saying cookies.auth token. So there can be a token that's in the header, but not in a cookie. Does that follow? I've got different ways I can send this.
How would it get put into the header?
How would it get put in the header? So the thing about the authorization header, the only one that, as far as I understand, that the browser supports out of the box is going to be basic authentication typically. And sometimes I've seen it with, like, if you're doing Active Directory type of sign-in, sometimes sometimes your browser will automatically send the auth header there. But I don't know that there's a way to get the browser to send the bearer header around by default. So typically, when we're using that authorization header, we typically set that up when we're issuing an AJAX request. Okay?
Okay, so in a certain way, this authorization header is kind of like a pseudo token.
It's not a pseudo token. It's just another way to send the token.
Okay, even if the token itself doesn't exist.
No, you still have to have a token. It's a way to send the token. So you can either send it as a cookie, or you can send it using the authorization header. And there's really never a need to do both. There's never a need to do both.
But in most cases, we're going to be getting it from the token.
The reason we're doing it with the cookie is because we need to support a website that supports logins, because we need to support the browser. If we're only supporting other clients, if we only need to support, like an app or things like that, then we could just do it using the authorization header.
Okay, it's accessible. Okay.
Yeah.
So the cookie generates the authorization token, which we're using in most cases in order to log in, or it could be done through the authorization headers, but that all comes from the cookie.
Yeah. It basically, cookies work well when you actually have a browser and you're doing this as a website. But if I'm doing it, if I need to access this API any other way, then the authorization header is a better fit.
Oh, okay. All right. That's a little bit more clear.
So,
okay.
All right. So I'm going to go back to bearer token. I've got my token there. So you can see it coming through. And so it's starting with that keyword bearer. So a few things I need to do is first of all, I need to break off that token. And I also need to check that keyword is bearer. So I've got two pieces of information here. bearer and the token, how can I break those up into two strings?
JSON.
It's a string. It's a string that contains two parts, right? They're separated by a space, right? So typically if I want to split those up, I split. So I can say, let's take the header and we'll split it on space. Okay. So if I were to look at how that logs now, you'll see that splits it from one string into an array of two strings. Got it?
Yeah, we should do this in any case, right? Not just for debugging, but this is just good practice to put in our auth file.
Yeah. So that's kind of the help. That's the start there. And then basically I want to say if that first part, right? So if auth header 0, if that is equal to bearer, then I know I have a token, because I don't want to handle this if like I get it as basic auth, I need to do something different. So in this case, I would say, well, if it's bearer, then I can take the token as being the second part of that header. So auth header 1. And I usually want to check in there as well that the length of that array is 2. Does that follow?
Yeah, that's pretty standard language there.
Yeah. So I take the auth header, I'm going to split it apart in two pieces, check that there's two pieces, check the first part is bearer, and then I can go in and say, okay, well, so we'll use the second part as we'll assume the second part is a token, and then do our validation with that because we didn't get a cookie. So that means if I introduce that code there, now I can, you see this is no longer redirecting me to the login screen. So my point is just to support the authorization header, you have to add a little bit of additional code to parse it.
Okay, and then it would also make it compatible with an app that doesn't have a browser.
Correct.
Too, which is a nice little bonus.
Yeah, so now you can use this with something else that, you know, where cookies aren't really practical, especially, if you're not dealing with a browser. So if I wanted to hook this up to an Android application or an iPhone application, this actually makes it easier to work with.
Yeah, or Postman in this case, right?
Postman.
Yeah.
So now I can support that authorization header. Okay. Now, obviously, I haven't supported the basic auth, but you can kind of see how I did this. You can basically do the same thing to support the basic authentication as well. You just have to add even more logic in there to do that check.